morning. That is where we start. The NBA players have reached a decision to resume the NBA playoffs. There was doubt earlier this week after the Milwaukee Bucks boycotted Game 5 in response to the shooting of Jacob Blake by police in their home state of Wisconsin. The NBA then canceled the remainder of Wednesday's and Thursday's schedules, but yesterday the players voted there will be postseason basketball after all. All right, Nick, what was your reaction to how all of yesterday unfolded?
Well, listen, first and foremost, selfishly, I'm very glad the NBA is going to resume the season. And that is nothing to set apart from what they are working towards and what hopefully a critical mass of our country is working towards in making our nation a little more fair and a little more just. But speaking for myself, and I think for a lot of people, one of the few pieces of enjoyment I've gotten in 2020 is watching professional basketball, particularly the playoffs. And we were concerned for months we weren't going to get the playoffs, and then to have them, and then to potentially have them removed, it would have just been another gut punch in a year that's been full of them. And Brandon, I'll say that's for me, but also for the players. I do think, and they're very smart people. Michelle Roberts, Chris Paul, LeBron James, everybody in leadership positions knows this, but I don't know if the audience does. If they had walked, the repercussions of that could have been felt for years. It would have voided the CBA, that owners would have almost assuredly locked the players out. We all of a sudden, we could be in a position where we weren't just not getting this year's playoffs, we might have been in a position where we weren't getting next year's season. And so while I understand what the players are fighting for, it would have been such a drastic step, and I don't want to call it impulsive, but they would have had to make it so quickly in just a matter of hours from we're playing to we're not playing, that I think it's best for the league, the players, and the fans, obviously, Brandon, that the games are coming back.
Yeah, Nick, I'm right there with you. I was relieved when the news broke that the NBA was going to return to play. But for your first point, Nick, I mean, 2020 is hard for everyone. It doesn't matter if you're this big real estate man or woman, powerful person in business that can travel the world and do so many things. Well, you can't now. You can't travel. You can't go to your favorite restaurants. Like, if I'm being just brutally honest, life sucks for everyone in 2020. And basketball, sports, entertainment has always been a place to escape. So I was relieved there because we need some place to go. And then I think about this. This is not their job. It is their responsibility to do well with their platform, but it's not their job. There are people, men and women, who get paid to do the things that they're doing now. So I don't like this whole narrative and this whole approach now that, it's the athlete's job, the NFL player, the WNBA player, the NBA player's job. Yep. Correct. That's not right. This is I want them to get back to doing what they love, right? So selfishly, yes, we need that escape, but get back to doing what you love. And then I also thought about this yesterday because one of my ex-teammates, Brian Urlacher, tweeted or sent out an Instagram post giving his comments on the current state of our country and what's going on around police brutality. I found myself going down this rabbit hole for the very first time. A lot of people won't believe this, but I've never, ever followed any blogs or any type of headlines or any comments that was just negative driven. And when I went to his page to see if this was the guy that I followed for a few years and looked up to, because when I talk about leadership, there's the first person to come to my mind, and the first person I talk about is Brian Urlacher and the Chicago Bears, and then it's the New England Patriots. So I run to his page and I read his comment, and then I said, well, this cannot be. This is not the guy I know. So I go down to the comment section and I want to say, who is entertaining this? And there was this one guy, I had no clue who he was. I click on his page, he had a little blue check. And then I'm following this guy and I'm reading his things, and something disturbing happened for me. I saw literally neighbors, people that live next door to me, liking some of these negative driven posts talking about arm yourselves, kill people. And I'm seeing my ex-teammates like these things. And I'm like, wow, I've never needed to be validated before when it came to this, because I live it. I experience it every day, all the time since I was a little boy. So I never needed to follow anyone, to hear from anyone to tell me that these things that are happening is true. So for me, this was the very first time that I was actually able to see that I'm living with people, doing life with people that feels differently about
that way
me.
About you, that feel that don't value you the way you should be valued.
Yeah, so I'm relieved that the NBA is back, but I also understand the weight of the world being placed on them right now. It's not fair. And seeing my ex-teammate Brian Urlacher and his comments was very disturbing for me. But it wasn't even about him, because I went to another page and I saw this other guy who's making a living off of just these negative comments and these negative posts, and seeing ex-teammates and then also neighbors like his things. And this is why I understand why these guys walked yesterday.
Sure. Kevin, what was your reaction to everything that happened yesterday?
My reaction was one of great empathy, and in the same ballpark as Brandon, I was taken aback by some of the comments that I saw online. And one of the things I saw multiple times was, what is this going to do? What is this protest going to do? And I had two reactions to that. One, my first reaction was just to dismiss those comments out of hand, that those people should just be written off. If you don't get it, you don't get it, and just be written off. And then I thought, my other side was like, well, maybe that is coming from a place of a lack of understanding. And I wanted to illustrate what I think these protests have done, what we know and what we don't know. So what we know, and this goes back to Kaepernick, that changed the tenor of policing reform around the country. And this is just, and there's countless, this is from American Progress, and there's lots, but I'm just going to illustrate a few to make my point. Sacramento City Council approved an inspector general to investigate police misconduct. Washington, D.C. passed legislation, bans the hiring of officers with a history of misconduct. New York City launched a database to track discipline cases. Utah's governor put a ban on chokeholds. Olympia, Washington now dispatches crisis responders to nonviolent situations. So if anyone says, I don't know if any of those things happen without a change in attitude in the country, that of course is built on the backs of Bill Russell and Muhammad Ali, but most recently Colin Kaepernick. So I think those are things that we know, that we can point to, that if you're in the comment section, these are real things that are happening, and that's why these protests matter. The other part of this is a little bit more of a creative thinking exercise. And you're not going to hear anything like this in any other sports show. And it's going to be a little bit weird, but I trust you. Trust me, if you get through this next 2-minute story, Nick, and I'll use you as a barometer, I think it will help put the protests in a historical sense. Because right now, I said yesterday that these protests, we're making history, but we're right there. We're 24 hours later. We're too close to it. We don't know what it is. And Stephen Johnson wrote a great book. It's called How We Got to Now. And he has this chapter on clean. And this is you got to follow me here. Chapter on clean describes a cholera outbreak in London. And a guy named Jon Snow, not Jon Snow from Game of Thrones, just a guy named Jon Snow. Everybody thought it was in the air. Jon Snow did some research, was the first epidemiologist, said, you know what, it's not in the air, it's in water. And he traced it to a water pump and basically solved cholera and helped propel germ theory and made clean drinking water the foundation of health. From there, people are like, all right, how do we get clean drinking water? How do we kill bacteria in the water? Okay, we get chlorine. Once you got chlorine, you know what you can get? Swimming pools. And then there's a bunch of swimming pools. You didn't have swimming pools. They're called moats. we get a bunch of swimming pools. There's a drought in California, and get Tony Hawk's walking by and said, oh, that swimming pool's drained because there's a drought. I'm going to skateboard in it. So it's a long way of saying the guy who discovered cholera and cured cholera also, in a way, made Tony Hawk skateboard. So the reason why I tell this story is this. We saw a historic moment yesterday, but you have no way of knowing how that historic moment is going to reverberate through history.
Exactly right.
Unless you can tell me what my son is going to be in 50 years. When we're looking at the TV and says, Dad, why does it say I'm a man? Why does it say education reform? Why does it say your name? And he's 6 years old. So unless you can tell me what my son is going to be like and how his life is changing in 60 years old, you can't say that these protests are not doing anything. There's specific legislation happening, and the future is brighter because of what the NBA players did yesterday.
Well, Wilds, if I'm the barometer, I give that an A+. I think it was you could follow it perfectly, and I was excited to follow you down the path. That's first of all. Second of all, I'll tell you what in the micro and then in the macro what yesterday did. Here's what the micro did. Brandon Marshall, a few weeks ago, was racially profiled, at least I believe, and had the cops called him for no good reason. He kept that story to himself or only told the closest people around him. Yesterday, because we were doing the show we were doing, instead of talking about Lakers Blazers, he told that story publicly. He then shared the video. Right. And there is a real chance that moved some people. I shared, my stories of parenting my family. And there's a chance that moved some people. So that is filling up the awareness bucket. So there's when it comes to issues, and it might be easier for people to think about it like this. Police brutality, think about it as an epidemic. You use a somewhat messy metaphor. Think of breast cancer.